All right, welcome back. Next, let's work on the navbar portion of Aurora Grove. So there's a couple challenges we're up against. One is that if we make the navbar transparent and we don't put anything behind it, which we're not doing yet, that's the next video when we're building this out, it's going to look a little odd. There's not going to be much to see. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But remember, it does change color into a dark background at this size. So we will be able to test that out. We'll need to also add in our JavaScript, which right now we haven't done. So that's another challenge. We're going to change the font, add this little underline effect. There's just a couple things to do there. So let's start now. Here's what we have, this beautiful website. I'm going to go to index.html, and just at the very top of our body, we can get rid of this h1, and I'm going to add in a nav, and it has a class of navbar, and our navbar expands at medium. So navbar expand medium, and on top of that, it's also the text is from navbar dark. So for now, I'm going to give it BG dark as well, but we will actually be removing that in a little bit. Okay, so then we have sort of the standard thing, which is the navbar brand, navbar-brand. Keep typing 2 B's. And let's just leave brand as nothing for now, the URL I mean. And inside of it, I did an H3, and I gave it margin bottom of 0. We don't have to add that now, but I'll show you why. It's basically to center it vertically a bit better. And I just typed Aurora Grove. And if we start with that, I can shut this down. Okay, that's something at least. The next thing that I did is I added the standard toggle button, the navbar toggle. So this is just straight from sort of the standard navbar recipe, navbar-toggler. And then we have to do data-toggle, toggle equals collapse. And then we need to give it a target, but for now I'm going to leave it blank because we haven't made the thing that it's supposed to collapse. So I'll leave that blank, and then in here we do our span with the class of navbar toggler icon, and we leave that empty as well. Finally, we go ahead and add our collapse div. This is the div that will actually show and hide, or it doesn't really hide, but it moves into that button, into that drawer. So in there, we want collapse and navbar-collapse. Okay, and if we take a look at what we're aiming for, we have 5 links: home, about, explore, contact, and book. The actual text doesn't really matter. Book does something different though. It does launch a modal. If we look at contact, it's just going to take us down to the contact form. Or it's not even a contact form. It's technically a newsletter form, but that doesn't matter. So book is one that we'll come back to and revisit. But for now, we're just going to add those 5 nav items. So they're nav links. So what we do is we make a UL with the class of navbar-nav, and then we'll worry about alignment in just a bit. We add for each one a nav item with an anchor tag that has nav link. So this is just standard markup from navbars. This never comes naturally to me, just to be clear. If this is seeming like it's just super easy, I always forget this. I think I've said that every time I teach it. Okay, so the first one was home. Then I'm just going to duplicate this, and we'll worry about the hrefs later. And so after home, we have about. After about, we have explore, and then I think it was contact, and then book was the last one. And if we save, we can take a look for now. We end up with this, and it is always collapsed. So the next thing that we need to do is add in our bootstrap, JavaScript that is, because right now I have included the 2 other dependencies, but we need to add bootstrap in. And to do that, we actually already have bootstrap, right? We're using the Sass files, but there's also inside of here, you might think in the JS directory, we could find the JavaScript we want. And that is true, but it's a little more complicated. This includes all the components, and it's not minified. These are individual pieces of JavaScript. Like what we did with Sass, you could incorporate those one at a time. However, I'm not going to. I'm just going to use inside of the dist folder, JS, there is, if I can make this larger, there's a bootstrap.min.js file. Wow, you actually can't tell which one it is. One of these is bootstrap.min.js, and that will contain all the JavaScript we need for Bootstrap. So I'm going to link to that script, source, and from where we are, which is from index.html, we need to go to the Bootstrap folder /dist/js/bootstrap.min.js. And you could just do bootstrap.js as well and save. Next up, let's go and set data target so that it actually works to collapse this div. So we need to give it an ID. I'll just call it main navbar. And then data target needs to be main navbar. And let's see if it's working. There we go. So now it is collapsing. And is it expanding at the correct spot? No. So why is that happening? Well, that's happening because I'm a moron and I decided to spell it as medium instead of MD. Okay, so now it should be collapsing at all. Well, at small and extra small, it's collapsed. It works, and then it should grow. There we go, and it does. That looks good. Now the next thing to pay attention to is we want this to be right aligned rather than on the left like it is here. So there's many ways of doing it. We could use flex utilities, or we can just come to the navbar nav right here and give it margin left auto. And that pushes it over. So if we're setting the left side of this to auto, we could also go and do margin right auto on this thing, but this is what I decided to do. And that pushes it over, but it still should look good when it's collapsed. Okay, so we have that. Next, let's change the font. So I'm gonna just change the entire font of the body because if you look, this font is used all over the place. This is actually a different font right here, but everywhere else is the same font, and it's one that I've included. It is a very popular, probably overused font called Railway. It's free on Google Fonts. So we can go to custom.scss, and instead of background purple, let's get rid of that. And in the body, I'm going to set font family to be Railway sans serif, like that. Fingers crossed. All right, our font changes. Now there's still a couple things. Obviously the background needs to change, but also, I don't know if you can tell, but our font weight is different. This is a lighter weight version of the font than what we have here. So we can go in and add some additional styling to our navbar. So I'm going to select the navbar class, give it a font weight of 100. Okay, so that changes all of that. This still right here, it's an H3, and its font weight is being overridden by the fact that it's an H3. So I'm going to select it more specifically by doing this, navbar H3, or maybe, actually I should do navbar brand. And because this is Sass, I can nest things like this. So I'll set its font weight to 100. There are better ways of doing this, or where it's not duplicated, but you could use the important exclamation point. I really don't like doing that. So I'm just going to do this to be explicit. So yes, we are setting it twice, really, which is not ideal, but at least it looks fine. Okay, so the next thing that we'll do, I actually made these nav items larger. So they're pretty small here. So we'll go ahead and do that. So in here, we can just select nav-item. And I did font size and set it to be 1.4 rems. There we go. It looks a little better. And if we compare, now everything is in the correct location. The next thing I did was add that hover effect. So we can do that. And it's pretty simple. We just do nav link :hover. So if you're not familiar with this, whatever we apply here, or whatever styles we add in, will only apply when we hover. So for example, if I set background to be purple, well, now we get this purple effect. But instead, what I did is just give it a 1 pixel border bottom. So border bottom is 1 pixel solid white. Nope, there we go. Okay, so that's the effect. However, It's actually a little smoother here. I don't know if that's coming through on video. I gave it a very slight transition. So to do that, I did transition, border, 0.2 seconds, I think. So that just says when the border is changing, make it take 0.2 seconds rather than immediate, or rather than making it immediate. So if I did a really slow one, you can see there it takes forever. That's not what we want. 0.2 is what we want. Okay, next let's talk about the background and making it actually go away. So it's going to be kind of ugly. Why don't we give our background a color right now, or our body a color, so that we can just see our text. So I'll say background is, sure, we'll do pink. And then we'll go to, take a look here. There is no background on the navbar until it collapses. We do give it a background then. So to get rid of the background, the easiest way is just to come here and get rid of BG dark. And that works. There's no background right now. However, it's not great because once it shrinks, there still is no background. And it's kind of difficult to see what's going on. Obviously, this is pink and it's not very easy to tell, but this does not look good. We want to differentiate the navbar once it collapses. So to do that, we can just use a media query. There's no way in Bootstrap that I know of, there's no responsive classes like this to change background color. So we're going to add our first media query down at the bottom, which is the usual place for doing that. And we'll do max width of 768 pixels. So this is small and extra small. And we need px. And then navbar is what we're styling. We're going to give it a background. And the color I went with is 1F, 1F, 1F. Like that. And now if everything goes to plan, there we go. We are getting that background there. And we have a regular looking nav, but when it's full size or when it's medium or above, there's no background. The other thing though that I did want to change at this small and extra small size, if you take a look here, this hover effect does not look good. Also, because there is a background, you can see that 1 pixel border shifting things down. It's kind of clunky. So I'm just going to remove that entirely. So one way of doing that is just doing our same selector, nav-link hover, and just say border bottom none. And now if everything went to plan, okay, it's working. We don't get that effect, but when we expand it, we do. It's very hard to see probably, but we do get that underline. All right. So that is it for now with the navbar. Now we are going to have to adjust a couple of things once we actually add in our showcase, the big image and the centered header, because our navbar is going to overlap with things and we have to change a couple of properties to make it look nice. But that's the basics of the navbar itself. So don't stop now because this is hideous, but it should look nicer in a bit.